Today, we are going to take up certain other important issues pertaining to our software engineering discipline. That software production with a qualitative attitude is nothing but an art. And in the industry, people have been following different strategies, methodologies, and techniques. And since it is an art, so it is quite open for the developers to follow any kind of standards they feel like are important. And it's nothing but this is the only way to get a competitive edge over the software development and production activity. We do talk of our software quality. Software quality can't be achieved in a day. But when we do talk how we can attempt to engineer a good software product, it's nothing but one of the very primary. It's your tools and philosophy that lies with our life cycle models. In our few of our earlier sessions, we already have discussed waterfall life cycle model, incremental life cycle model, evolutionary life cycle model, rapid application development life cycle model, and there are some more interesting models which best suit in the present day industry. Since we do talk of three kinds of crisis, it's your customer, competition, and change. And when we do look forward for how to get a competitive edge to the clients and customers, are we in a position to what? To keep up the requirements changed to the needs of the clients? We certainly must learn the nerve of the clients. And that's why today we are going to take up our very important series of models, and that is nothing but our spiral life cycle models. If we look as to how it is important, it is one of those important models which initially was coined and introduced by Boehm. And Boehm is known as one of the very key contributors in the software industry who has worked a lot for enhancing our software quality. And in case of your spiral life cycle models, what we find? Nothing but it's a mixed blend of 4 or 5 models together. We have been talking for waterfall life cycle model from the very beginning, and our Winston Royce introduced our waterfall life cycle model. And still we do teach at almost all industry and organization and institutions, because that was the base model. And further, in order to meet out the changing needs, we look forward for some more primitive models, and that includes your iterative and prototypings. So spiral life cycle model is a mix-up of all the models. So I would say, in a way, it is nothing but it would be the father of our different life cycle models. Have a look at, even particularly at the diagram that we just do follow, and you will exactly get the crux of our discussion of the spiral life cycle model. Look here, this spiral model, it is scattered over our total 4 quadrants. Here is the first quadrant, and that is dedicated for what? Determining objectives, alternatives, and the different individual constants. Here is the second quadrant, that is your evaluate alternatives, identify and resolve risks. And third quadrant is dedicated for what? Development, verification of the next level product, and the fourth quadrant is dedicated for planning for your next phases. So if we look into this spiral kind of diagram, what do we find? That it is not the initial first quadrant important. Here we would be even evolving further and further across even all the 4 quadrants. And what do we find? This will be the beginning. This is the beginning point of our this spiral. And what it is initiating its operation from here. It will be finishing at our this quadrant. It will be going to the next. It will be going to the next. And again it will be again just you're entering to the first quadrant after finishing your one spiral. So it is not stopping at the same point it started with, but rather it will be evolving. So my summation for discussing of these quadrants is focused on to one thing. We are not freezing the requirements. We are also not restricting ourselves to the oral requirements in the very beginning, but rather we are making it quite flexible. That as how we change from one quadrant to the next one, which will be nothing but which is even indicating a flexibility for the clients, so that they can even pass on the requirements from time to time. Third thing is more important, and that is not available in the earlier models so far we had discussed. That is, it is working for our different kinds of software risks that we may also come across. And more so, what kind of software risk could be there, we would be talking in detail. But let me sum up one thing, that is risk could be pertaining to our human competence. It could be pertaining to what our the technology. It could be pertaining to our in-house development. So in general, our software risk may be referring to any of the aspects which are helping our computing system directly or indirectly. Next to this, we should never forget of what? Of our prototyping. Because prototyping, even whether it could be your normal programming style, or it could be our normal development approach, or even if you do look, even our normal everyday life, we even hear the word prototype. So what we do is, even in this model, we are also even basing our total development is based on what? On our different prototype development. So what we do start with what? Handful of requirements from the clients. So that because we can afford to start it, we need not to wait until we just receive the complete our SRS. So we want the requirements from even the handful of requirements we can evolve. And what we are doing, nothing but just like we are evolving in this way. So what we are having, this is nothing but it will be your radial. This will be your radial dimension. And when we are moving across, that is your S, that is what? Angular. So our angular and our radial dimensions, they are more perfect for getting or for determining the overall cost as well as the total development even philosophy that would ultimately be able to what? Come up with a functional prototype model. And this is how we indicated nothing but it is a mixed blend of even the earlier models, and that come out to be quite perfect. And it is one of the most liked even life cycle models in the industry. Now let's make a rigorous study of this diagram. Look for, in this particular first quadrant, I just indicated that it is the objectives, alternatives and constraints are laid down. Whereas into the second quadrant, if you look systematically and more closely, look for, this is the dotted line. So separated by our this dotted line, we are having on the upper quadrant our risk analysis. And here on the down quadrant, we are having your prototyping development, starting from the first prototype, second and up to the operational, that is the last prototype. So our second quadrant is meant for what? Second quadrant is totally dedicated for what? Evaluation of our different design alternatives. Now let's move on to what? On to our third quadrant. So third quadrant is dedicated for what? Is meant for our development as well as verification of the next level product. Now here, when we moved our this initial spiral and when we entered to the third quadrant, what we saw, it was nothing but the concept of operational. It's nothing but it may or may not exactly be functional. So what we do, as we come from this intermediate center point and to the outside, what we are having, this the one spiral quadrant, it is another, it is third, and it is fourth. If you do look into the innermost one, we have the concept of operation. When we are moving on to what it is, the emulations, software requirements, requirements validation, and then when we move out, we do look at the models, software product design, design, validation and verification. And when we are looking at the outermost, it will be nothing but benchmarking, detailed design, code, unit test, integration test, acceptance test and implementation. So friends, if we in totality, if we are summing up as to how our spiral lifecycle model is in a position to deliver the best possible, then you certainly should not be amazed at that, because the ingredients of our software development through this experience or through this model, it will be a unique kind of model. And that's why the people, they have liked it most. One more thing I would like to share, even this spiral models has also been even perceived differently by different even industry people, and they would have, even with a different perception, would have generalized in their own ways and style. So because our software engineering is not confined to any technique, is not confined to any even formulation, but rather it is quite open to any philosophy, provided it should be aimed rightly, and that should be even targeting even a qualitative development. Because the very initial aim of software engineering discipline is what? Is to produce a qualitative product that should be aimed to be delivered at the right time to meet the requirements indicated, stipulated by the clients, and that should also be met within the budgetary provisions laid down for it. So that's why it's quite important, that is, need to deliberate on to our different experiences of the people in the industry. So in a way, when we do look at our different individual needs in the industry, they are also sometimes in a fix whether that specific model would fit my requirements or not, whether I should follow the same model my friend also followed in some software project or not. We need not to worry for this. More important will be what? That we need to look at our overall requirements of the project. What will be the total span of your development time, and how you are addressing your client's needs. So we would be, you can say, accumulating the requirements right in the beginning phase, or we are allowing it to go up to the last point. Here is the difference. I already have even discussed and even stressed all through my earlier discussion too. More important is what? To elucidate our this requirements. We need to even populate the requirements documents thoroughly. Only then we may initiate. But the population of the requirements document in the initial stage need not necessarily be the case always. Wherever there is a flexibility, we certainly must permit it. One more thing, when we are looking into our the nature of the spiral models, as had been witnessed by the industry people and so many different researchers and our software practitioners, they have perceived the models in their own ways and style. So I'll be just sharing a flavor of the even those life cycle models by your other people too, that how they perceive it, how they view it. Have a look at. It's nothing but it is the same model looking for spiral. What does it do? Cumulative cost to date. So that's why this is our radial dimension. It will be serving our purpose. This is nothing but angular. It will be just indicating the overall cost that has been even scattered across the different spans of your life cycle model. Similarly, look at. Now I would like to tell that before we just focus our discussion onto the particular diagram, here you would notice one thing important. That is, it will be nothing but it will be almost the same kind of model as we had discussed, and that is waterfall life cycle model. What we are doing, we already have even embedded our risk analysis as an integral activity all across the complete span of our software development activities. If you do find, look at our this box. Within the box, we have enumerated 3 activities: risk analysis, rapid prototype, and then verify. Then we are moving on to the next phase. And what is that? Risk analysis, specification phase, verify. Then we are moving on to the third one, risk analysis, design phase, and then verify. So in total, what do you find? All across all the phases that we have in our total software development life cycle, we have incorporated your risk analysis and the verification integrally to all the activities. And at the last, after this, that is your risk analysis, integration phase, and test. Here is what then we even look forward for any kind of maintenance. And then these are the dotted lines which is just going back to even different segments of the complete our phases. These indicate these are meant for even your maintenance. So what did you get out of this particular diagram? First thing, this model is permitting what our verification all across. So when we say, was this the requirement? If yes, who will validate it? Is the customers. Okay. If the customer has already indicated or given a yes, then only we proceed to what? To specify it. And once you have specified, we also need to ensure that whether what the client conveyed has it been specified perfectly or not. It means we also need to verify it. Has it been recorded or slated in the same way and split as was conveyed by the client? If yes, only then we proceed to what? To the next phase, and that is your design phase. In the design phase, what we do? We are nothing but with our requirements, we proceed to what? We proceed to the normal development and the coding. And then we move on to what? On to the implementation and our integration. So this was nothing but it was the main way of looking at our spiral life cycle model, that it is nothing but it will be our modified waterfall life cycle model, but with a different intention. And the intention was what? To make it our risk analytic. Let's move on to how we can simply look at these models. What we do? Again, it is nothing but this is a simplified version of our spiral life cycle model, because to make it understand among the practitioners, among the students, among the developers, we certainly need to even understand the philosophy as how this model is ultimately going to help the developers. So what we have, if risk can't be resolved, our project is immediately terminated. It means we can't afford to move it and to prolong so last. And what can be the different possible potential risk into this? This could be the timing constraints, it could be personal lack, it could be competence of the team, it could be dependency on the hardware delivery. So what we do find that our spiral life cycle model is nothing but it could be perceived by the developers in their own ways and style. More so, let's look at another flavor. Nothing but have a look at even this model. What do you find? Here, our different cross-section of the lines is indicating even segmentation of the activities which are scattered all across our life cycle model. In the innermost, then to the successive spiral and to the last one. What we do find? Here, we are concerned to our customer communication. Here we are just focusing on to planning. Here we are just totally focused on to what? Our risk analysis. Here we are just involved in the designing and engineering. And at the last, it is the construction and release. And then what? We just leave it to the customers for evaluation. So friends, in this way, our spiral life cycle model, it is such a very rich model where we do value the customer. Since customer is the king, we can't afford to even skip any one of the clients and customer requirement. And unless or until we involve the customers, what kind of good design we are aiming at, it is never possible. So this is the first primitive requirement of any good software product. And that's why people do associate the word engineering, whether our engineering associated with the requirement engineering, whether it could be the engineering word associated with the risk engineering. Since why we are even so fussy about even talking or engineering activities, it is primarily because we don't want any milestone unturned where we may have to pay the cost not in terms of money alone, but rather in terms of even fulfillment of the requirements of the client, fulfillment of the customer satisfaction, fulfillment on the account of even the total cost, and fulfillment of the total overall needs. So this is the way that how we perceive and always look forward and always welcome in the industry. Okay, let's join hands and come up with more and more important models. So I'm again submitting, it is so evolving a subject where every day more and more developments do take place. More and more even technologies do keep coming. Can we afford to skip them, overlook? Not possible. Reason? Because it will affect or it will impact our processes. So why we should not be ready to harness the potential of the new technologies or to exploit the potential of what even more skilled hands who are ready to deliver something innovative and new. So moving further to this, look for this is again nothing but the same model. It is particularly perceived differently. And if you're looking for, here we have focused specifically onto different constraints, our goals, alternatives, because when we say our primary aim is the budget, how we are moving out from the inner point to the last point, how the budget initially in the first quadrant was small, it enhanced in the second, and it particularly was quite high at the last one. What were the total constraints? Constraints are nothing but the restrictions. Maybe the restrictions posed by even design, even constraints, restrictions posed by the technology, posed by the training or the lack of personnel. So in a totality, do sum up our, whether it could be your budget, it could be your alternatives, it could be your constraints, it could be our different kinds of risk, It could be different types of prototypes. It could be even different flavors of the design, starting from initial to the last. And it could be any kind of your different testing involved. So this is how we perceive that our development should be of this kind of nature. Further to this, let's elaborate something more, being a very important model, that our spiral model consists of different iterations, iterative cycles. And spiral model can be considered a generalization of other process models. If you do find, each cycle consists of 4 steps. And what is the first step? By the way, it is identify the objectives. For example, performance, functionality, ability to accommodate change. Second, it's your identify the alternative means of implementing this portion of the product. For example, different design, reuse, or buying. Next, it's your identify the constraints imposed on the application of the alternatives. That is, for example, cost and schedule. Similarly, if we do detail out the second step is aimed at evaluation. And what we do, evaluate the alternatives relative to objectives and constraints. Evaluate the possible risks involved with each alternative. And third, resolve the risk using prototyping, simulation, benchmarking, and requirements analysis. So friends, if we ponder onto our second step, here we are even more focusing onto the risk analysis. But the question is, what kind of possible risks we can have? Risk, it's such a kind of fear that we come across during our different phases of development. If, for example, if I engage an engineer aiming at that the engineer would help me on my project which I am aiming to deliver by a specific deadline. I assess the candidate, I assess the engineer, and I thought the candidate, this engineer would be able to deliver the product or the task assigned to. But if doesn't do, what will happen? It will be nothing but it will be delaying the project delivery. Would you not consider that it is also one of the personal shortfall? Certainly yes. This is also a kind of risk. One more important aspect of our different risk, that is sometimes in hurry we do estimate, okay, this is the overall cost of our system that we are about to deliver. But the question is, we may not be in a position to. So firstly, let me even enumerate what can be the possible kind of software risks. Have a look at. These are the different kinds of total top 10 software risks. The first, personal shortfalls. Second, unrealistic schedules and budgets. Third, developing the wrong software functions. Fourth, developing the wrong user interface. Fifth, gold plating. Sixth, continuing stream of requirement changes. Seventh, shortfalls in externally furnished components. Shortfalls in externally performed tasks. Ninth, real-time performance shortfalls. And 10th, straining computer science capabilities. Now, let me explain that how software risk we need to analyze systematically. What we saw, unrealistic schedules and our budget estimates. Don't you think that whenever we plan any software project, what kind of strategy we need to put up? What kind of even hardware and software we need to engage? What kind of even staff we need to employ? What kind of even controlled and working environment we need to strike at. These are nothing but these are all the plethora of requirements that we need to have. In case you demanded something from the management that we would be able to even deliver the product by a specific deadline, and this will be the probable estimate of the cost and the budget for the project. Now it is the responsibility of the project manager that how the project manager strikes the plan for our software project. How one will be scheduling even to execute the planning. Further to this, how to distribute of the different resources, to whom to assign, how to assign, and the different guidelines. So these are nothing but these are the roles and responsibility of what? Of even a good project manager. So friends, risk analysis and risk management, we would be deliberating at depth, but in context of our this present discussion on our this spiral life cycle model, I certainly wanted you to be aware of even that is the kind of risk probably we may have or we may face. Now let's commence with the third step of our life cycle model, and that is it's meant for what? It is aimed at developing and verifying the product, and the product could be the software requirement specification and the design specification. And in the last quadrant, and that is the step 4, we plan for the next phase, and depending on the next phase, this could be a requirement plan, integration and testing plan. So this is how we accomplish our different tasks or different segments or different quadrants of our software lifecycle model. Now the next big question comes, when to use our spiral lifecycle model. Now let's understand the dynamics of our stability of the spiral lifecycle model. Is it possible to strike the requirements in the beginning? Is it possible to proceed with all the requirements together? Is it possible even to deliver the prototype quickly? These are the big even regions as to how we should decide whether my designing activity, our software development project would exactly fit into the given framework or not. So let's even discuss as what are the situation or the opportunities that where we need to decide that whether this model we need to follow or not. First reason that when we need to use our spiral life cycle model is when creation of prototyping is appropriate. Second situation, when cost and risk evaluation is important. Third, for medium to high risk projects, this is the normal size of our software projects, it would be able to help and guide. Fourth, long-term project commitment, unwise because potential changes to economic priorities. Fifth, users are unsure of their needs. Sixth, requirements are complex. 7, new product line. And 8, significant changes are expected. So, if we even look into the requirements broadly, it means in case we are having a limited budget, we are having a limited requirements, we are in hurry to deliver the prototype so as to seek even the customer and client feedback. So the idea is we need to strike very intelligently and very wisely as whether the kind of project I do have at hand, should I do deal with even a spiral life cycle model or iterative model or evolution life cycle model or waterfall life cycle model. because situations would arise at different times while dealing with the different projects in the industry, that sharply and equally well in all situations, this model may not prove to be the silver bullet. But yes, because even the present situation in the industry, because every time requirements keep changing. Further to this, even the group of people, they are also even directed onto what different even projects. Again, we are also even supplementing or delivering the functionality into different increments. So, are in true terms are ready to afford the design in increments? Are we ready to afford the design over a longer span of time, not with the even small subset of requirements? Third, would it also be possible even to involve the customers in exploring more and more from them as far as requirements are concerned? So, in the nutshell, these are the main even intended our focal points, which would certainly help us decide as to whether even the current software project I must handle with our spiral lifecycle model or not. Now, let's look at what the different strengths and weaknesses of your spiral lifecycle model. The first strength of this model, it lies in the fact that it introduces risk management quite beautifully. Second to this, prototyping controls cost. Third, evolutionary development automatically come as a byproduct. And our release of different builds for beta testing are also evolved across even your quadrants. And our marketing advantage, that it is also easier to market because our prototypes could be delivered in the market quickly. At the same time, this model is also restricted with some of even strictly, these are not the limitations, but rather in comparison to even certain extended benefits, there could be certain restrictions too. And that's the first is a lack of risk management experience, lack of milestones, and even management is dubious of spiral process, change in management, and your prototype versus production. So, this is how we need to strike a balance as whether the advantages, the benefits, the plus points of this model, whether it overweighs the even smaller problems that we discuss as witnesses or not. So, it will automatically help us decide that whether our user scenarios, user requirements, our prototypes, our increments, our even risk mitigation, whether it has been met or not. So, it is one of the most beautiful models ever introduced, and even subsequent models are also further based on it. One more thing I would be even sharing with you, that even this model also has been significantly changed. The original model, it was coined by Boehm in the early 80s and even prior to that. But even the same model with the current perspective in terms of the client's needs, in terms of the ongoing technological advancement, it has improved further and further. So, it will be also wiser as whether we should even follow this model in all situations, or would there be also something more needed to be worked into the current model that certainly would help us decide. Further to this, we have this another important model that is also we do call as our spiral model, but it with the word prefixed when spiral model, you might be thinking as how we say it's designated as a win-win spiral model. Friends, I'd like to share with you that this model is based on management theory. And what we do, look, we are nothing but we are more concerned about the stakeholders. And unless the stakeholders are happy and they have their own win-wins situations, it will not be even possible to even help the customers in the true terms. If I just help you to understand that how in terms of spiral, this model is different from the earlier model we discussed. Have a look at the diagram of your win-win spiral model. And the one, if you are looking, that is in your gray color, these are your three quadrants. If you do look at the down one, which is in the white background, these are again even nothing but it is almost the original spiral model. What exactly we do? Now, let me make you understand the dynamics of this particular model. In the first quadrant, what we do, we need to identify our next level stakeholders. Second to this, we strike at our stakeholders' win conditions. And then we go for what? Win-win extensions, and that is reconcile win conditions and establish next level objectives. And nothing but if at the top of your this original life cycle model, if you put these three things together, it will make even your production of your software system more successful. Because once you have identified your stakeholder and you are so concerned about the stakeholders' requirement and their win-win conditions, so what we need to do, we need to tune the development, the prototypes, the risks as per the requirements of the stakeholder. And that's why when we say in case of win-win spiral model, do we have even all the requirements met? If I am saying as a developer, am I happy with the kind of software development? If you do ask your client too, is your customer also happy with the requirements they indicated and the delivery? This we also need to strike it. So more systematically, if you perceive this kind of model, you would really understand the dynamics. Once again, I am just taking you to even the particularly diagram of your this win-win-win spiral model. Then it will really be very fantastic if you take in the true spirit this model, and it will really help to meet out the needs and requirements of the stakeholders. Thank you.